I'm 83 years old, and I'm going to tell you something I learned too late. And I learned it in a way that still makes me feel sick if I sit with it too long. You are trading your life for something, maybe money, maybe approval, maybe the illusion of being useful, and the exchange rate is a lie. And look, I'm not saying money doesn't matter. I'm a widow living alone. I pay my own bills. I know exactly what it feels like to look at a repair estimate and think, well, that's going to hurt. I know what it feels like to buy the cheaper option and hope it holds. I know what it feels like to worry about medical costs and prescriptions. So I'm not here to give you some cute speech about how love is all you need. Money matters. But I need you to understand something before I continue. There's a point, sooner than you think, where chasing more doesn't protect you. It isolates you. It distracts you. It lets the real life you meant to live slip right past you, and you don't even notice until you're old enough that time feels like it's running downhill. I didn't spend 47 years as a nurse like the woman in that transcript, but I've spent a lifetime watching people make the same bargain. I watched it in my own family. I watched it in my marriage. I watched it in my children's lives. And I watched it in myself when I was so busy holding it together that I didn't see what I was losing. So I'm going to tell you what I saw, what I did, and what it cost. I'm going to start with a woman I knew from church years ago. I'm going to call her Eleanor because that's close enough, and because I don't want to drag her real name through the internet. She wasn't famous. She wasn't on Park Avenue, but she had what people call a beautiful life. Big house, man who wore good suits, vacations, a yard that always looked like a magazine. I used to envy her. I'm not proud of that, but I did. I remember standing next to her at a potluck, holding a paper plate of ham, and she said to me, very casually, I never cook. I don't have time for that, like it was a badge. Pay attention to this detail because it's going to matter later. When she said it, she didn't look happy. She looked tense, like she was bracing for something. Years later, when she got sick, heart issues, then complications, her house was still spotless. The yard was still perfect. But her children didn't come much. One lived out of state. One was always busy. One came long enough to check a box and leave. I visited her twice. I stood at the foot of her bed and watched her stare past me at the ceiling fan turning slowly. She didn't cry about dying. She cried about being alone in a house she'd worked her whole life to earn. And I remember her saying, I gave them everything. I don't understand. And this is where the story gets heavy, because I understood. I had 5 children. I know what it means to think you're doing everything for them. I know what it means to run yourself ragged and call it love. When Vincent and I were raising our kids, we were always chasing something. Stability, security, a better car, a better neighborhood, more savings. We weren't greedy, we were scared. We grew up with parents who didn't always feel safe financially, and we absorbed that fear like it was a family recipe. So we worked. Vincent worked hard. I worked hard. We were tired. We were proud of paying the bills. We were proud of not asking anyone for help. And we missed things. Not the big things usually. We made the graduations. We made the weddings. But we missed the small, daily moments where closeness gets built. The casual talk at the kitchen counter. The unhurried dinners. The evenings on the couch where you actually listen instead of half listening while planning the next day. And what I didn't understand back then was that children don't bond to your sacrifices the way you think they will. They bond to your presence. They bond to your attention. They bond to whether you seem emotionally available, not whether you bought the nicer shoes. I'm not saying my children don't love me. They do, in their way. But I am saying this. If you spend decades proving love through work, don't be shocked when your family learns to live without you. Now let me tell you about the second person, because the first story isn't enough to make the point. The second person is Vincent. Vincent wasn't a Wall Street man. He was steady. He was proud. He was the kind of husband who'd fix a cabinet hinge at midnight if it bothered me. He didn't talk about feelings all day long, but he showed love in actions. When the kids were young, he'd come home exhausted, and I'd be in the kitchen, and we'd do that thing married people do, talk logistics like it's a conversation. Who needs what tomorrow? Did you sign the permission slip? We're out of milk. We were running a small business called Survival. Then the kids grew up, and I thought, now we'll have time. Now we'll breathe. Now we'll travel. Now we'll sit at the table and linger. We did, a little. We had good years, but the window wasn't as big as I assumed. Vincent got older. His knees bothered him. He slowed down. He got quieter. I didn't notice at first because I was still busy. Busy is a drug. It keeps you from feeling what you don't want to feel. Then he died, and suddenly I had all the time in the world and nobody to share it with. People think the regret is about the big dreams. Italy, cruises, the fancy trips. Honestly, that's not it. The regret is the Tuesday nights I spent fussing with laundry while he sat in his chair wanting to talk. The times he said, "Want to take a walk?" And I said, "Not now, I'm in the middle of something." I can still hear myself saying, "Not now." And here's the cruel part. I wasn't in the middle of anything important. I was in the middle of habits. Now, the third person I want to tell you about is someone who did it differently, because I don't want to leave you with nothing but warnings. I want you to see what's possible. I knew a couple named Margaret and Tom, not wealthy, comfortable, a modest house, a life that looked ordinary from the outside, the kind of people who brought a casserole when someone had a baby, the kind of people who remembered birthdays, the kind of people whose home always felt lived in. Margaret told me once, "We decided early on we weren't going to build a life we needed to escape from." That sentence stuck. It stuck because it sounded like a luxury, but it wasn't. It was a choice. They turned down some opportunities. They didn't upgrade everything. They didn't chase every last dollar. They ate dinner together. They went to school plays. They showed up to small things. When Tom got sick later, that house filled up. People came by. Their adult kids came. Their grandkids came. Not because of guilt, because they wanted to. And I remember standing in Margaret's living room one afternoon after Tom passed, watching people wash dishes and fold chairs and talk quietly. And I thought, this is what money can't buy. This is what you earn with presence. Now I'm going to bring this back to me because I promised you a confession, and I'm going to give it to you straight. After Vincent died, I got scared. Not just sad, scared. I was scared of being alone. I was scared of being forgotten. I was scared of my body failing. I was scared of needing help and not getting it. So I did what a lot of older women do. I clung. I called my children too much. I tried to stay involved in every decision. I offered advice they didn't ask for. I tried to be necessary because I thought being necessary was the same as being loved. Honestly, that was one of my biggest mistakes. And then came my fall. I fell in my living room and couldn't get up. I lay on the floor for 11 hours. I couldn't reach my phone. I heard it ring at one point and stop, and I remember thinking, if that was one of my kids, they're going to assume I'm fine because I didn't answer. They'll think, Mom must be napping. They'll think, she probably doesn't have her hearing aids in. They'll think 1,000 innocent things while I'm lying here. I peed on myself. I was ashamed. I felt like a burden. I felt like I was disappearing in my own home. When they finally found me and the dust settled, my children didn't respond with tenderness the way I pictured in my head. They responded with strategy, with control, with fear dressed up as logic. They said, Meadowbrook. They said, just for 30 days. They said, Mom, don't make this hard. And I went. Because I was exhausted, because I was bruised, because I didn't have the strength to fight then. At Meadowbrook, I learned something that still makes my mouth go dry when I say it. Institutions don't trade in love. They trade in schedules. And if you're not careful, you'll get slotted into a life that looks safe on paper and feels like dying slowly. I watched people wait for help like they were waiting for permission to exist. I watched trays get dropped off like feeding time. I watched a woman ask the same question 3 times and get brushed off. I watched myself start to shrink so I wouldn't be labeled difficult. Wait, it gets worse. I realized my children were relieved. They slept better. They stopped calling as much. They told themselves I was handled. And in that moment, I saw the whole bargain clearly. When you trade your life for something measurable, money, control, productivity, you end up with a life that other people can manage. You end up with a life that looks fine from the outside and feels empty from the inside. So I fought my way back home. And when I got home, I didn't just change my house. I changed what I valued. I stopped trading my peace for my children's approval. I stopped trading my dignity for their comfort. I stopped trading my attention for the constant noise of the world. I started making my days smaller, but more real, more mine. After that fall, I started writing things down, just for me. Little rules I made for myself so it wouldn't happen again. What to keep by the bed, how to set up the living room, what to say when my kids pressured me. I didn't think anything of it. It was my granddaughter Claire who found the notes months later and told me other women needed to read what I'd written. She's the one who put it online. She called it The Ultimate Guide to Freedom. I still feel strange about it, honestly, but that's a story for the end of this video. Here's the question I want to ask you, and I want you to answer honestly in your own head. How much of your life are you postponing? How many dinners have you skipped because you were too tired from work that doesn't love you back? How many phone calls to someone you care about have you delayed because you thought there'd be time later? How many weekends have you spent doing things that look responsible while your actual life waited in the next room? Someday is the most dangerous word. Someday is how you avoid facing the trade you're making. And I'm not telling you to quit your job and run away. I'm telling you to be honest. I'm telling you to stop pretending you don't have choices just because the choices are hard. Because I can tell you something I know for sure. When you get to my age, nobody wishes they'd answered more emails. Nobody wishes they'd impressed more strangers. Nobody wishes they'd spent more time proving they were productive. People wish they'd been there. They wish they'd sat at the table. They wish they'd listened. They wish they'd called. They wish they'd taken the walk. Now I'm going to close with the part that makes me uneasy because it's personal and it's happening right now. My son David called me again this week and said, "Mom, take that book down. It embarrasses the family. You're airing private business." And my daughter Linda has said her version of it too. And I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about taking it down because I'm 83 and I don't like feeling like I'm selling something. It makes me feel exposed. It makes me feel like people are judging me. But then I remember the women who write to me and say, "I didn't know I could fight for my home." I remember the women who say, "My children are pressuring me, and I felt like I had no voice." I remember the women who say, "I fell, and I thought my dignity was gone forever." So here's what I'm going to say, plainly, with my whole chest, even though it embarrasses me. The link to the ultimate guide to freedom is in the pinned comment. I might take it down soon because I'm losing my nerve and because my son keeps pressing me. So if something I said today reached you, click it now. Don't wait. And if you're still here with me, leave a like. It tells me to keep telling the truth, even when my own family would rather I didn't. I read every comment you leave, every single one. Tell me what you've been trading your life for. Tell me what you want back. I'm here. Subscribe if you want to keep talking. Every week I sit down at this table and I tell you the truth, because your life isn't waiting somewhere in the future. It's happening right now, and you deserve to be present for it.